At the time of making this video, it looks like The Last of Us Part 2 is about to win Game of the Year, and ooh boy! This is something I've been waiting to talk about for a long time. I've lost a whopping 38 hours of my life playing 2 complete runs of this story, and at this point, I think I have some qualification to talk about it. I gave this game a second chance, because maybe there was something I was missing. That's why this video is coming out now instead of when the game released. I needed a few months to let my thoughts settle, and I played it again, but how wrong I was. Before we start, I want to show you guys something personal. It's a clip from the very first YouTube video I ever made, my top 10 favorite video games, uploaded June 30th, 2014. It's a pretty terrible video, which is why it's no longer available on the channel, and I really don't agree with everything in this video anymore. But one thing I can't deny is my rankings of numbers 1 through 5 particularly really hasn't changed all that much, though the order may be a little different due to what we're going to talk about in this video. Here's a little bit of me talking about what my favorite game was.
Ellie flat out steals the spotlight, mainly because of how much character development she undergoes. This doesn't mean Joel is a one-dimensional character either. He faces one of the biggest decisions I've ever seen anyone make in the climax of a game or any sort of media, and leaves the player to contemplate that. It's got everything down pat, and this game has dug into my soul as number 1. The Last of Us is truly the best game of all time, and there are no other comparisons, at least until The Last of Us 2 comes out, because I kind of like sequels.
Even though I cringe at how bad that video is, and all of my old content in general, it makes the point that is integral to the core of this video. As you see, even many years ago, I was still passionate about The Last of Us and Naughty Dog. It's an incredibly solid game. That's why I beat it on every single difficulty, nearly 100%ed it on the PS3, and have the remaster on the PS4. Part of the reason I love the game so much is because it turned out to be such a pleasant surprise. The game came out on a Friday, June 14th, 2013, and that Monday prior to the release, the local news tech show was even talking about the game, showing the advancements they made pushing the PS3 to its limits. But unfortunately, as time went on and I aged and learned more through my personal experience and at university, I didn't necessarily see my opinion about the game changing, which isn't a detriment by any means, but compared to what I considered my number 5 game at that time, BioShock, there's no doubt a game like that has become more and more complex and interesting every time I play it. The best way I can compare it to something is like watching Jurassic Park. It's an incredibly solid movie, and as a child who wanted to become a paleontologist, I could enjoy it for the dinosaurs. And now as an engineer, I can really appreciate how insightful all of the technology they chose to feature really was.
White rabbit object. Whatever it did it all. But with the key checks off, the computer didn't file the keystrokes, so the only way to find them now is to go through the computer's lines of code one by one.
How many lines of code are there?
About 2 million.
Did you see that in a movie too?
Actually, yeah. But a different one. See, there's a sequel. It wasn't as good.
And because of that, I appreciate media like BioShock and Jurassic Park more and more as I age. So over 7 years, nothing really caused my opinion to change on The Last of Us, which, like I said, is a testament to the level of storytelling they were able to achieve. That is until the sequel rushed its way into the middle of 2020, a year plagued by pandemic, riots, and a complete disheartening of the people around the world who were trapped in their homes, unable to do anything else. And at this time, I was quarantined myself because I had the coronavirus. So I literally had nothing to do except lock myself away for hours on end and play this game. I would also like to mention I went into this game as blind as a clicker, which is apparently a derogatory phrase now according to Twitch policies, but rest assured I had no exposure to the spoilers that plagued the internet. There is no way the creators of this game could have known the state of the world in 2020. But even in all the darkness, depravity, and despair of the world, the first game had a message that was really uplifting that the sequel completely chose to ignore. When you're lost in the dark, look for the light. Believe in the fireflies. What that quote tells me is expertly conveyed in the first game. There's a certain layer of beauty to this terrible, horrible world, which is something you can see right now. Since lockdowns have taken effect, walking through empty forest preserves was one of my calming experiences that I started to enjoy with my family. The first game was about a journey between 2 people brought together due to unfortunate circumstances And it's really a story about love. It's a story about finding beauty in this post-apocalyptic world where everything is terrible, everything is awful. You know, these two damaged characters come together and rekindle part of their humanity, right? And then this game just craps all over that whole idea. There is inherent beauty in our world, a fundamental goodness that we can witness despite all the violence, anger, and hatred. 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 Hatred is the key motivation in The Last of Us Part 2, which juxtaposes itself against the beauty of the first game, which was about love, familial love between two damaged, broken characters. But we'll get back to that in a minute. I would also like to point out how honest the box descriptions for these games really are. Joel and Ellie, brought together by harsh circumstances, must survive a brutal journey across the US in a dangerous post-pandemic world. That's short, sweet, and to the point, and accurately sums up the journey. Now let's contrast that with the description on the sequel. Experience the devastating physical and emotional consequences of Ellie's vengeance as you embark on a relentless pursuit of those who have wronged her. Well, this one does tell you everything in the game, but I should have known that I wouldn't enjoy the experience by this sentence alone. I mean, even just look at the box art between these two games. The first and the second game show starkly contrasting tones. If I saw this game in stores, I would not buy it. Thankfully, that's why I had my sister to pick it up because, like I said, I was quarantined. But bad box art aside, I think we should really talk about the biggest inherent problem of the sequel that the first game never had. A singular, uninterrupted vision by one person, and that person is Neil Druckmann.
Even for us who have played this game, we can't even count how many times. We know it inside out. We're still emotionally moved. I've just finished a playthrough and I was crying by the end of it. And we can't wait to hear what you guys think once you finally play it.
So that was a fucking lie.
Neil, my man, Neil, what happened? Why are you like this? Why do you openly ostracize your fans, the people who bought and supported your game? Why do you blatantly lie in your marketing of the game? This game is so bad. Like, the fact that they finally, today was the first day, 6 months after release, that they put out an honest trailer about what was in the game shows you, like, just the level of stupidity, you know?
Take her out!
No. Why do you shove your own political opinions down our throats, and if we don't 100% agree with you, we're racist, sexist, homophobic gamers? Neil Druckmann took everything good about The Last of Us and destroyed it before our eyes and called us terrible people if we didn't enjoy it.
The truth is, I don't know why people are mad at this game because they don't know why they're mad.
You don't know what you don't like about this game? Really? That's your argument? We all know pretty much what we don't like about this game, and I've summarized that in a brief list.
Throwing aside beloved characters for characters no one gives a shit about. Killing off characters in ways that fundamentally break their previous characteristics. Awful pacing. Terrible dialogue. Lying about which characters would be in the game in order to sell more copies and hide the fact that the story was complete shit. Placing characters in settings that make no sense for the world of The Last of Us. Characters making contrived decisions only to push the plot along. Shitty teen drama. Every single male character is cartoonishly emasculated. The few and far between good moments and advancements from the first game are overshadowed by a terrible story. Ham-fisted attempts to make certain characters appear good when you know they're not. Flashbacks within flashbacks. Okay, like seriously, let me break character for a moment. Call of Duty Black Ops is the only game that could ever pull that off, so game industry, just stop trying it. You're never gonna make it work.
The numbers, Mason. What do they mean? Where are they broadcast?
I don't know anything about any numbers.
Now, each one of those points could be a video unto itself, but that's not what I want to focus on. And if you like the game by some miracle, that's great. You can have your opinion. You know what you like about it, and I know what I don't like about it. Now, I don't want this entire video to be boiled down to this one statement, but I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention why myself and other people playing the game didn't particularly like the overtly partisan politics encroaching the gaming experience. Listen, I've memed about the political leanings of this game before, but if you make a game that so blatantly shoves actual character development aside for stereotypes of intersectional groups, don't be surprised when people don't like your game. The game forces you to play through a cheeky hammer versus sickle fight, and when these leanings aren't shown in the story itself, they're built into the UI. Neil, I really don't need to see the Fist of Power in my pills tab when the current political climate is what it is. Now, I never saw Ellie, Abby, Dina, Mel, or any of the female characters as particularly strong in any capacity. Well, except for Abby being physically strong, but that's a meme unto itself. Every single one of them acts like an unstoppable sack of meat that could be replaced with any arbitrary male character, and nothing of narrative value would be lost. Which is unfortunate because it's not terribly difficult to write strong, independent female characters without making them act like total, unhinged psychopaths.
She's pregnant. Good.
You what?
There's Sarah Connor from the Terminator movies, Ripley from the Alien movies, Katara from Avatar The Last Airbender, Ranma from Ranma 1/2. Oh wait, I don't know if that one counts. Jolene from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Stone Ocean, Faye Valentine from Cowboy Bebop. Hell, you even have Chloe Fraser from Uncharted and Tess from the first game. You've done this before, Naughty Dog. There's nothing wrong with how you used to write female characters. But why was there such a dip in how the female characters were written in this game compared to the first game? Well, if you take anything away from this video, let it be this point. I honestly don't think the game would have been that bad had there been someone to wheel back Neil a little bit. But unfortunately, instead we got Halley Gross. She is the secret killer of The Last of Us Part 2 because she was the only person that could have stood up to Druckmann and told him his ideas were shit. But no, she was a yes man, or I should say yes woman, because Druckmann would call me sexist. Have you ever watched something from Halley Gross? I feel like this is a very important part of why The Last of Us Part 2 failed so miserably that literally no one has talked about. I decided to dive deep down into the other works of one of the two writers on probably the most anticipated video game sequel of the last decade. And you know what I found? Hot garbage. I went through episodes of Banshee, Westworld, and Too Old to Die Young, and all I got was confusing drib-drab and awful dialogue. You know, I was wondering why Ellie and Dina were still talking about some lame off-screen kiss 4 hours into my zombie survival horror game, and if you watch the episodes of the show that she was a screenwriter for, you would not be surprised one iota. And it's so obvious that on competent shows like Westworld, there's a decline in quality for the episodes that she was a part of. Halley Gross is probably the most unqualified person to be narrative lead and co-writer for the most anticipated video game sequel of the last decade, but we did get Rian Johnson to direct The Last Jedi, so I don't know, history's repeating itself 3 years later. And if you read these interviews from Halley Gross, especially on the ending of Part 2, they seem to fundamentally misunderstand the established characterization of Joel and Ellie. When Ellie leaves behind the guitar at the end of the game after an emotional flashback with Joel, Halley Gross goes out of her way to state the intentions of Ellie, removing any potential nuance or anything thought-provoking from that scene. Quote, Ellie is putting the idea of Joel to bed. She's burying him respectfully at that point and moving on to a new chapter in her life, whatever it might be. But he's in the rearview mirror when she leaves the house at the end. This fundamentally breaks the entire narrative of the first game to a point where I literally cannot call it my favorite game anymore. This take misses the entire dynamic between both Joel and Ellie. The fact that Joel lied, Ellie had her suspicions, maybe sort of knew, but was okay living with the lie because she had her new father. And even this ending isn't totally lost. She could have flipped the guitar and used her other hand to play if she couldn't play with her injured hand. She didn't have to give up Joel. She didn't have to put Joel out of her life completely, but that's what the narrative lead, the other co-writer on this game, wanted. They wanted Ellie to separate from Joel, which is something you can't do in The Last of Us. Ellie brushes him off like nothing mattered. Nothing he did mattered. And this is why how they handled Joel was so disrespectful. I don't think many people went into the game thinking Joel would come out alive, but this is downright abhorrent. Halley Gross fundamentally doesn't understand the world, characters, and motivations that she was in charge of, co-in charge of, because Neil was all aboard, hitting the gas, going all the way on this one, and that's why she should never have been hired as a co-writer. This entire game is written like a young adult novel, and as it turns out, most of those aren't even worth the paper they're printed on. Basically, you have two love triangles, and hold on, wait a minute, what are love triangles doing in my zombie survival horror game? Not one, but two, meant to be parallels of each other. Ellie, Dina, Jesse versus Abby, Owen, and Mel, and my initial reaction after the game ended was that the game just put way too much focus on the wrong type of love. The type of love that leads to the self-perpetuating cycle of violence that this game is so vehemently against.
I haven't always done the right thing.
You're a piece of shit, Abby.
You always have been.
Sexual love, which comes off as teenage lust, is what drives the motivation between these characters, and it's not something we or your core audience is at all interested in. And I get it, right? I talk about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure on YouTube, and I'm here making a video about something completely different. Technically, you don't owe anything to your audience, but why would you go out of the way to intentionally piss them off? When I cover new topics, I try to make it as open as possible to get people interested in new ideas, things that they wouldn't otherwise have searched for. Here we have something that screams, if you aren't riding the Druckmann circle jerk train, you're not allowed to have fun. Like, come on, when I get more enjoyment and find better narrative writing in a Pokemon movie, you've done something wrong. But your ego is so inflated that you can't admit it. Think for a moment that The Last of Us never did anything groundbreaking in what story it decided to tell, but instead refined the narrative to a point where it was unparalleled for its time. The groundbreaking steps came from the technical department, where the game outshone everything on the PS3. And when you can see the insane level of detail between Uncharted Drake's Fortune and The Last of Us, and recognize that they're both on the same console, that's worth the praise that you get from the audience. The Last of Us Part 2 is up for Game of the Year, Best Game Direction, Best Narrative, Best Art Director, Best Music, Best Audio Design. Ellie and Abby are up for Best Performance, Best Innovation in Accessibility, and Best Action Adventure. Realistically, I think the game only deserves awards for audio design and innovation in accessibility, and potentially, depending on what you like, either art direction or music. But we know that the critics, who don't actually play games, who would call SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated difficult and clunky and rate it poorly, will want this game to win all of the awards. I mean, I beat Battle for Bikini Bottom as a child, and the concept of an IGN critic claiming on the one hand, the great experience from playing The Last of Us Part 2, and at the same time bashing a beloved child's game just shows you what they prioritize.
The Last of Us Part 2 is a masterpiece worthy of its predecessor. Taking strides forward in nearly every way, Ellie steps into the spotlight and carries the sequel in a manner that feels like the culmination of everything that's made Naughty Dog's blockbuster storytelling so memorable. But while Part 2 is a thrilling adventure, it still makes time for a stunning, nuanced exploration of the strength and fragility of the human spirit.
Meanwhile,
I'm disappointed that rather than addressing any of the real issues with Battle for Bikini Bottom that could have been tweaked without ruining the spirit of the original, Rehydrated leaves history intact at the cost of passing on opportunities to make this a better game. But it does so little to stand alongside the best, or even the pretty good, platformer remakes and remasters we've seen this generation.
Chloe, they're journalists.
They don't play games to get high scores. These people play games for social points. And I don't think it's a bold statement to say Fat Gerald, or whatever his name is, I honestly don't know what his name is, was the best character in the entire game. And that's saying something. I feel so bad for the actors and actresses who tried to put their best into the material they were given. But again, why didn't a single one of them step up against Druckmann's unhinged vision and say no? Was the success of the predecessor too much to intimidate people into not questioning his decisions? Is this like a George Lucas situation with the prequels? People seem to forget Bruce Straley, a person who was behind making the Uncharted series and the first game what it was. Someone who could have presumably reined in Neil a little bit, called him on his crap. And that's not like the game is entirely bad either. Set pieces like the Seraphite Bridges or the Rat King boss battle are moments that stick out as enjoyable every time I play them. The graphics are so detailed and powerful to the point where I think they might have melted my PS4. But as pretty as the game is, it means absolutely nothing when a terrible narrative is tying it down. I have no attachment to these standout moments because I literally don't care about the characters in them. This game's got a lot of good things, like what I'm playing through right now. They're overshadowed by so many bad things. When you make it so that nothing you did over the last several hours of gameplay means anything to the story just to show how brutal and unforgiving life is, then you as the player end up asking yourself, what's the point of even playing the game? To me, the point was to make this video and shield myself from defenders who would say, oh, I didn't play the game, or oh, I didn't give it a second chance. A game that actively goes out of its way to invalidate the time invested in it should be automatically disqualified from winning Game of the Year. I think there's an argument to be made that The Last of Us Part 2 is a very interesting game. Interestingly horrible, but interesting nonetheless. Not every story has to follow a rigid 3-part narrative structure, but in its goal to be different and push the boundaries that no one asked for, the audience was left behind. Ba-dum-tss. When I say the writing is young adult novel tier, that's not exclusive to the romance. Narrative cliches like saving injured animals, a fear of heights, protecting children seem below for a studio like Naughty Dog. Narrative cohesion seems abandoned just to take risks that only appeal to a very small portion of people who are actually going to play your game. I've seen the comparison that Abby and Lev's relationship is a mirror of Joel and Ellie's, but at that point, wouldn't a player just choose to pick a superior game and fall back to the first one? If things are going to be rehashed so much, then there truly was no point in making this game in the first place. It's a story that never needed to happen because the people at the top misunderstood how these characters were established, and that's what's incredibly frustrating. Now, I may be an engineer, but during undergrad I had to fill my schedule with other electives, and one of those was an analysis of film history. What brings me back to that class is the fact that this game was written for those people who are ensconced in overanalyzing one scene here, one expression there, and then proclaiming the entire work as a masterpiece. But sometimes when you look too close, you might be missing the bigger picture, and this is my engineering brain going right now, but bear with me. This is a game that actively and aggressively tries to invalidate your experience, and just as much as hatred is a motivation for the main characters, it's a motivation for the player looking back on the game as well. That's why I say I hate The Last of Us Part 2, but I hope you understand it comes from a more sympathetic way of saying I hate it, instead of the way Druckmann portrays haters. But this game is not made for you and me. This game was not meant to be enjoyed by everyone. And I'm not saying every game has to be meant to be enjoyed by everyone, but there is a very specific audience this game is targeted at. College elites and game journalists / critic types. This game is meant to be overanalyzed by people who do that for a living. And honestly, I'm guilty as charged because I do that for my series of choice too. But what makes a good series is one you can enjoy on a baseline level and then overanalyze to your heart's content. And Naughty Dog games, up until this point, were pretty good at that. The people they are marketing to are not the backbone of their company. They're not like you and me. The fact that this game has already won itself a golden joystick for best storytelling and ultimate game of the year shows that to an insane degree. As bad as the game is, though, I am glad it exists. It shows a fundamental disconnect between people who actually play games and the apologetic reviewers who weight ideology significantly more than an enjoyable gaming experience. This game is a cautionary tale on not to give complete control to one man, one singular vision that stems from, we don't use fun to describe our games. This game made me realize what not to do when I am writing my own narratives. This game gave me some of the most pathetic moments to laugh at, that it produced the greatest series of memes of 2020, bar none. I hate this game, and that's okay. I will never be buying another Naughty Dog game again. The time when they produced banger after banger is long gone. This video is a send-off to my younger self who was naive enough to believe a sequel would be handled with care. And in some ways, this video is a send-off to 2020 itself. The Last of Us Part 2 encapsulates all the ire and malice people feel about the year in one gaming experience. This game deserves every single criticism thrown at it, and the fact that people in the upper echelon who don't respect you or me are being apologists for this game is truly telling. This game is objectively a hot mess of one twisted man's uncontested vision. Druckmann truly wanted to make this game immortal in our minds, and I suppose the only way he could do that was tear down everything we loved in the process. So, I guess I can say, congrats Neil, for a game we'll never forget and all your meaningless awards. Why do you hate The Last of Us 2 so much? Because I guess I could sum it up, because I love The Last of Us 1 so much. Maybe that's why I hate The Last of Us 2 so much. But hey, this is another video that I just thought about making for me, so what did you think? This isn't my typical type of content, but I thought it was worth making, simply for the fact that I don't think I've been motivated so much to talk about something in a long time. Let me know your thoughts on The Last of Us Part 2 in the comments below, and how wrong Neil was and how correct I am, obviously. Nothing contested here in the Shuckmeister comment sections. If you do ever want me to revive my top 10 favorite video games list, let me know. That could be something very cool, and I've definitely made many improvements from then. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and turn on all notifications. Have a beautiful doing, and I'll see you all next time.